Can the Broncos offense manage to move the ball without arguably their most productive player? Will we see Sean Payton dial things back at all for his young sophomore quarterback ahead of a pivotal AFC West matchup? And does Paul DePodesta have the tools to finally fix the Colorado Rockies? All things to come on today's rundown. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribe to our Denver Sports 1043 The Fan YouTube page. You can find us at the handle at Denver Sports 1043 on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you're watching us on X or on Facebook, we appreciate you. Like, subscribe, turn on those post notifications so that you never miss a moment with us. Want to get right into it and welcome in our friend of the show, senior Broncos writer Andrew Mason, who has covered all things Broncos for about as long as I've been alive, I think, Mace.
Not that long.
And I appreciate everything that you do for us here at the station and online. I want to get into a couple of things here with you because you put out a couple of pieces at DenverSports.com that I think our listeners would very much enjoy. But first, I want to get to maybe some of the more pressing news of the week, which is surprising considering we got a cancer diagnosis and subsequent procedure from a Broncos starter this week. But J.K. Dobbins has been the subject of a lot of conversation after the game this past week, where he was tackled with what has been much maligned in NBA and NFL circles as a hip drop tackle. He's dealing with a little bit of a foot injury there, and his status for this weekend and the next handful of weeks is in doubt. Are we looking at a potential multi-week absence here for J.K. Dobbins?
Potentially. We'll get a better idea on that as the days go on. I mean, it was maybe a little bit of a good sign that he did not go on injured reserve on Tuesday, although you can kind of leave that open till Saturday and not change the number of games, number of days that you can have him on injured reserve, so you can leave that open as long as possible. But the nature of foot injuries like that, at least according to some of the doctors that are out there speculating on it based on what they've seen from video, him seeking a second opinion, I mean, that's certainly kind of bringing you into a danger zone, potentially, as far as where this can go. And so if you take him out, unfortunately, it's transformative for the offense because of A, how much he's brought, and B, how complete he is of a running back, because RJ Harvey has been your number 2 running back, but he isn't the blocker that J.K. Dobbins is. And so that's part of the reason why he's RB1 and why RJ Harvey as a rookie is still kind of clearly RB2 and why he's still only the spot back. So if you have to go without J.K. Dobbins, do you end up seeing more of Tyler Bidet effectively becoming more of the every down back because he can handle pass protection? And Bidet, when he's been in there, unfortunately, it's not been good in limited action for him so far this year because he's got the highest drop rate of any NFL player with at least 10 targets so far this season. So maybe he gets better being out there more, but if he has to go out there, he's going to need to do better than he has so far this season.
Traditionally speaking, Mace, I think it's kind of conventional wisdom that if you're seeking a second opinion, it's in large part because you maybe weren't thrilled with what the first opinion was offered to you. But we will see how it pans out for J.K. Dobbins. I do think your assessment on Tyler Bidet and the potential for him to kind of take on an elevated role makes sense too. If I could offer one more suggestion or potential prediction, Mace, do you think that the absence of J.K. Dobbins and the fact that RJ Harvey as the RB2 maybe Quiz isn't quite fully ready as we think to take on the same level of production and responsibility that J.K. has as the all-encompassing back, could we see a little bit more designated and dedicated use of Bo Nix's legs within the offense? That's certainly been a catalyst in their fourth quarter comebacks when the offense loosens up, plays a little bit more free, and Bo utilizes that athleticism that he has certainly carried through the first year and a half of his career.
It couldn't hurt. And I'd say that, along with going up tempo a little bit more, even though it's not something Sean Payton necessarily wants to do, these are two things that Payton should consider incorporating more into the offense to maybe get Bo Nix uncorked and a little bit more comfortable. given what we've seen from Bo Nix so far this season, and especially in the last couple of weeks, just to get him back on track, because, and we'll get into some of this as the conversation goes on, there's some pretty clear evidence that Bo Nix, in terms of his progression, is regressing a bit.
Let's turn the page to that right now, actually. Centering in on Bo Nix, you put together your 3 numbers piece, as you often do throughout the course of the NFL season. This one was centered around Bo Nix through the first 10 weeks of the NFL season. And there were 3 numbers with 3 distinct different meanings that stood out to you, one being Bo Nix's success rate, his deep ball rating, and his dropped pass percentage among the pass catchers that he has been distributing the ball to. Which of those 3 numbers, Mace, stands out to you the most in terms of what we saw last year and how it's changed into the first 10 weeks of 2025?
Let's start with the deep ball passer efficiency rating, because I think some of that is tied to footwork and how that's been inconsistent. Now, sometimes your footwork is going to be off when you're under duress. Every quarterback has to throw off platform when you're under pressure from time to time. That's part of the game,
right?
And everyone has to do that. So that happens. The thing that is unfortunate and is concerning for Bo Nix is how often the footwork is off when he's in the pocket and has protection, that he's not stepping into his throws properly, that sometimes he's throwing off his back foot when he doesn't have to. Sometimes he's taking that extra step into the throw when he doesn't have to. And you're seeing throws missed short, intermediate, and deep. Example, last week we saw a short pass in the left flat to Evan Engram in the red zone that was way off, had no business being off. He misses that, and you can see the footwork is off from the beginning, and that's basically where a lot of the accuracy issues are stemming from, frankly, I think, is from the footwork. You know, there's an old saying, the feet lead the eyes, and it all kind of starts from the feet and goes from there. And I think when I look at watching Bo and why he's regressed in terms of the deep ball efficiency, this year his deep ball passer rating is 71.6 according to Next Gen Stats provided by the NFL. That's placing him 23rd of 33 eligible quarterbacks. Last year his deep ball rating was 108.3. That was 5th. So he's gone from one of the most efficient deep ball quarterbacks to one of the least efficient. And we see, and it's evident on the film, you see the deep ball inaccuracy. It's also evident in the data as well. And where that's coming from, where a lot of those balls are being missed, it's because you're seeing the footwork go askew, and that's leading to some of the inaccuracy issues deep. And that frankly is a concern as I watch Bo Nix, is the unsettled footwork, and I think that's where a lot of his deep ball inaccuracy is coming from.
I would tend to agree, and I think that when you're looking at the Broncos offensively, maybe from a more macro perspective, Mace, I think there's been a lot of conversation about scheme versus personnel/execution when it comes to diagnosing the inefficiency and the struggles that the Broncos offense has had throughout big stretches of games and the course of the first half of this season. So where do you fall down, Mace? Which camp are you most firmly footed in when it comes to the problems for the Broncos offense being more of a product of a scheme from Sean Payton that isn't necessarily fitting and meshing with the personnel he has at his disposal, or that the scheme itself is working and it's more in the fault of the players, Bo Nix, with maybe a regression in footwork and overall performance, or blocking or route running from the execution of the players' standpoint?
Well, it's definitely not 100% one or the other, and it never is that. Somewhere in between. Some of it is on Sean Payton, no doubt, because I think he could do a bit better job of meeting Bo where his strengths are. He could go up tempo more often. And unfortunately, he hasn't done that. When the Broncos go tempo, they're very effective. Bo is comfortable with that. We see that with how efficient the Broncos are when they go 2-minute, and we've seen it when the Broncos are in close and late situations, and Bo is very effective in those. But Sean Payton, he likes to get the perfect personnel for each play, and so we see the subbing in and out quite often. We see the different personnel groups. It's something where I think the ideal thing would be for Sean Payton to maybe let a little of that go and go tempo more often. And yes, it does create a different type of game, and it does increase your defensive exposures because you're going to play some more high possession games if you're going up tempo. But I would argue what we've seen from this defense this year is that it's up to the challenge of that if you play games that have 2 or 3 more possessions on each side per game because you're going up tempo, that the D is up for the challenge of that. So I'd say probably that's like the 35 that's on Sean Payton, is needing to go tempo. I don't think his scheme overall is antiquated. And I think he's actually still a pretty good play caller. In fact, there's, the idea that he doesn't run the ball, he's right there in the middle of the curve situationally speaking in terms of how he runs the ball, in terms of the balance that he has, and the run-pass balance in terms of the tendencies relative to the downs. And actually the run-pass balance the Broncos have is pretty ideal if you take out the 2-minute offense, when of course it's going to be skewed toward the passing game when you're in 2-minute at the end of the half because of the constrained clock situation. So I think Sean Payton's play calling has actually been pretty good for the most part. What I would like to see, and he admitted this last week, is there wasn't an adjustment fast enough to when the Raiders went with a lot of heavy fronts to counter the Broncos when they ran in 11 personnel. So just a little bit more in-game adaptation. That's that's part of the 35% that's on Sean Payton, and then the 65% that's kind of on offense. It's not just Bo Nix. Another number that I mentioned there is the Broncos having the 3rd highest drop rate among their pass catching targets. Evan Engram having the highest drop rate among 39 tight ends with at least 20 targets so far this season. So he hasn't blossomed in the way you'd like. Cortland Sutton having one of the higher drop rates among wide receivers so far this season. In the top 16 among 73 wide receivers. So it's some of that's on the personnel as well. One thing I can say is that probably not as much on the protection up front, because the Broncos still number 4 in pass block win rate up front from the offensive line.
And that's factoring in the loss of Ben Powers that they've been dealing with for a number of weeks now, which is another feather in their cap. I tend to agree with you, Mace. I think that Sean Payton's play calling, there have been spots and moments where it's been magnified that maybe something could have been done better, but I do think his offensive scheme and system has been a little bit of a boogeyman for detractors and or critical minds and eyes here in town. And I think that the execution should take the lion's share of the kind of onus in terms of improving, because at the end of the day, players make plays. That's what they are brought in to do. Mace, if I could selfishly steal a couple more minutes of your time, there is a baseball question that is looming here in the Mile High City. And you are an avid baseball fan and have covered the sport for a number of years as well. So I feel your opinion is as valid as any. We got word from Paul DePodesta, who spoke to Thomas Harding and Patrick Saunders, 2 of the baseball mainstays here in the Denver area, about his vision forward as the new president of baseball operations for the Rockies. And he had an interesting comment about the challenge of turning things around at 20th and Blake. And for our listeners watching on social media, go ahead and take a listen.
Well, I think it's a unique challenge for a lot of different reasons. Certainly people have talked about the ballpark and the altitude and things like that. But for me, one of the things that's the most interesting about it is just the impact it can have on so many people, right? I mean, one of the things I talk about all the time in professional sports, certainly we're in this to win and all those sorts of things, but what we're really in it for is creating these salient moments for our fans, right? These moments that will live on in their lives, their families' lives, et cetera, where it just makes this indelible impact. Now that's because of you won something, right? But to be able to do that in Denver, where the Rockies just have such reach with their fans, and to do it in that environment, I just think would be incredibly special.
An emphasis on salient moments, Mace, and I think I would argue that for all of the wrong that has gone on at Coors Field and with the Rockies as an organization over the last handful of decades, I actually think the creation of salient moments has been the one thing that they've done a decent job of, because the ballpark experience and the romanticized nature of watching games at Coors Field has been what's kept them in the top half of the league in attendance. It's kept money coming through the turnstiles, and it may be, in some people's eyes, salient moments has been one of the detractors in making the team better on the baseball diamond. Mace, what did you make of Paul DePodesta's comments?
Well, as he was saying that, I was hearing that and thinking, boy, there's the real treasure we made was the friends we made along the way, energy
Right.
there. And then he kind of saved himself by saying the salient moments are when you win.
Which should need to be clarified. But
Yeah, exactly. And so when I wrote a piece about it at DenverSports.com, and I retweeted Patrick Saunders on that, but I sort of made the point of saying he did say it was ultimately about winning. But yeah, you're right. They as far as creating salient moments, as far as things you treasure with your family and friends and your nearest and dearest. Yeah, the Rockies have succeeded at that. I mean, I'll just, my own personal experience. I mean, my daughter and I have had many of those salient moments together. Absolutely. at Coors Field. That's part of our, that's part of her experience growing up, and why she loves going to baseball games. Why that's part of her life. So it's like, I heard that and I'm like, boy, somebody in the organization kind of got to him. Like, the more it's not just about the wins and losses, but kind of the family atmosphere, because it is very much a family atmosphere at 20th and Blake. And that's probably one of the valid critiques there of the Rockies culture, that they haven't been willing to make a lot of the hard choices, because Dick Monfort certainly, to his credit, but it's also been a negative at times. Dick is a very loyal soul, and sometimes it has kept him from making the cold, hard, calculating moves that most other baseball organizations would make. It's why he's probably clung to some things too long. So on the one hand, I'm glad Paul ultimately said it was about winning. On the other hand, I hope that he doesn't get too much into that environment in terms of how he goes about things, because the Rockies do need some cold, calculating, hard decision-making there in terms of how they run things. Because they've probably done things too often from the heart and from the gut. Like for example, an example of doing things from the gut is if they make a move, like, okay, we're going to invest in the bullpen here and in free agency, and it doesn't work out, well, then, we're never going to do that again. You can't operate that way. You can't, do one thing once and then never do it again. Part of operating analytically is knowing that, okay, you're operating sometimes on a percentage basis. And so let's say, sometimes the percentage, sometimes if it's 80%, it's going to work. There's a 20% that it doesn't. And sometimes it's not in that 20%, but you have to trust the numbers and know that it's going to work out more often than not. So you have to be calculated, and you have to kind of be a little bit cold in how you do things from time to time. So I hope that kind of even though it can be noble to operate from the heart, I hope that doesn't overcome Paul DePodesta a little bit too much, because a reason why he did succeed in his past time in Major League Baseball was because he operated from the numbers and from a point of rationality and not necessarily from a point of emotional connection, which can be very noble in a lot of ways, but I think is one of the things that has really held back the Rockies.
Yeah, listen, it's a fascinating balance I think that baseball clubs have to measure, which is having baseball minds and baseball people in the building, and then weighing that against the more analytical thing and the people that come from the numbers approach. And Moneyball was multiple decades ago, and his stint with the Cleveland Browns, one might argue that as a chief strategy officer, they didn't have the best strategy among the 32 NFL clubs. But make no mistake about it, more than the Cleveland Browns, more than turning around the A's, fixing the Colorado Rockies and turning them into the winner that they've shown to be in a small blip on the radar number of seasons will be, I think, his toughest challenge, and I certainly hope that he's up to the task. Mace, thank you.
I hope he is too. Real quick, Richie, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no.
Having been out for nearly 10 years, the most important thing now is going to be what people he surrounds himself with. That's the key to all this, because he's got the entire analytics game has changed since he left baseball. So now it's who he's what minds he's surrounding himself with, because if he doesn't have the right people around him, this is destined to fail. He's got to bring himself up to speed, because it's not the same game as it was when he left it.
Yep. No, I think you're 100% right. We've been clamoring for an outside voice to come in and help kind of provide a different perspective. And that other perspective now has to build the people around him that he helps, or that he thinks can help fortify that. So we will see how it pans out. There will certainly be plenty of storylines to follow along over the course of the baseball season as it gets going again into next year. Mace, thank you so much again for joining us. I know you got to head out to Broncos Park and get things going over there. So we will keep an eye at DenverSports.com and everything you've got going there. And we'll catch up with you again soon.
Appreciate it, Richie. Good to talk to you.
Love it. For the rest of you out there, have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Happy Hump Day. Like and subscribe our Denver Sports YouTube channel when you have a chance. It's right there at Denver Sports 1043. And that's YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you're watching us, as many of you are, on X, Twitter, or Facebook, we appreciate you. Make sure you follow us, like, subscribe, share these posts, and turn on those post notifications so that you always get notified when we go live and you never miss a moment with us. Thank you all again so much for joining us, and we'll catch you again tomorrow at noon for the next rundown. I do what I love what I do. Second nature's up,